Hey you all, Farmer Jesse here. Today I'm going to discuss the many different types of no-till systems currently in use on our commercial, certified organic, often a little bit unruly farm. I'll describe how and why we use these different systems and some thoughts on where they do and maybe don't work on a commercial scale, depending on our crops and climate and so on. I'll also talk about some no-till trials I'm doing where I'm trying to essentially build the mulch from the ground up in an effort to develop a system that is not so heavily reliant on deep layers of compost. Is that it? I feel like that's it. So let's do it. All right, so one of the most important things you can do as a grower is to develop your farmer toolkit, so to speak. That is to say, to develop a broad understanding of different techniques and tricks that can be used depending on your situation or crops or access to materials, etc. That said, I'm not suggesting you use every no-till system I describe here on your farm. My farm has an element of experimentation to it so that I can have some insight on all these things for you, but I also grow a very big diversity of crops on which I have to make money. So in effect, the systems do have to work. However, having a good understanding of each system and where it does and doesn't fit can help anyone broaden their proverbial farmer toolkit. And one note, I'm only discussing bed management today. There are many no-till systems for things like bed flips and bed preparation and incorporating amendments and so on. I've covered those before, or I will cover them another time, so make sure you are subscribed to this channel. Anyway, before we discuss the different systems that we use here on our farm, it's important to understand a little bit about our farm specifically and context before diving in. We are in Kentucky in Zone 6B, and in our particular part of Kentucky, the majority of the flatland has horses on it and everything else looks like a mild slalom course. Kind of bumpy and slightly sloped. So we have one of those roughly 1 acre slalom courses in cultivation. That acre is not all growing space. Honestly, there is no standard I'm aware of for the question, how big is your garden? But for us, we do not consider our gardens to just be the growing space, which is roughly half an acre in physical bed tops, but rather all the space that has to be mowed or managed in some way. So that includes some trees, the pathways, and our current soccer/t-ball field that will one day be a high tunnel. Anyway, the gardens are split between high rotation crops and low rotation crops. This part is important. High rotation crops consist of carrots, lettuce, green onions, beets, summer squash, and other crops that are in that sort of 60-ish days to maturity or less. The low rotation plots would be things like potatoes, garlic, sweet potatoes, popcorn, winter squash, and so on. So each section uses its own no-till systems. Let's start with the high rotation plots. For the high rotation plots, that would, be the faster growing high profit crops I mentioned. We originally set them up with a deep compost mulch system, or no-dig system as is often referred. This means that we mowed the grass, rolled out some paper mulch, and covered the beds with about 3 yards of compost per 50-foot by 4-foot bed. So essentially several inches deep. We also did some lasagna-style beds with hay as the base, and those did fine, really. Not a true lasagna, like not multiple layers, but essentially we just did one thick layer of hay and covered that with a 4 to 6 inch layer of compost. I don't know that I would recommend using hay for this per se, but at the same time, we have not seen a greater presence of weed seed or anything in those beds, and the hay lasagna beds grew some amazing garlic last year. So straw is still probably a better carbon option, but it did work. Anyway, we will allow those to sit for as long as we can before planting, and then we plant. So that's the system. And it works fairly well across contexts. It's very low in weed pressure and easy to plant all season, including the winter. Though because it's dark, the surface can get very hot in hot climates. So perhaps shade cloth should also be employed to help protect crops in warmer regions. Note that not all compost is created equal, so make sure to do a fair amount of research, seriously, to make sure you're getting something worthwhile. Honestly, can't emphasize that enough. I dedicate an entire chapter to compost in the no-till garden in my book for that reason, and maybe that could be helpful.